Let's talk some more about team chemistry. I want you to expound on that. Of course, the Dallas Mavericks played in 11 overtimes this year, and I think one of the things that we saw that the nemesis was their inability to close out the fourth quarter and in overtimes. Mark, how much of that is a familiarity factor and these guys just not playing together?
Oh, I think that's a big part of it. Youth, I think, contributed to it as well. But the chemistry aspect of things, the not having a lot of familiarity with one another, of course, those sort of things are going to show up in late game situations. So the fact that you had Mayo and Collison and Brand and Kamen and all of these new guys that were brought into the fold this year, clearly the fact that they hadn't been on the floor together in crucial situations contributed to the Mavericks' inability to play well in a lot of late fourth quarters and the overtime deal. They did again win 3 overtime games at the one in January and then one in March and a big one against Denver late there in April, very late in the season, one of the last games of the year. And I think not only did you see the overtime thing get better, you also saw the record of close games get better. At one point this year, the Mavs, I think the record was 4-9 that were in games that were within 3 points ahead or behind in the final minute of the fourth quarter. And that record got a whole lot better. I believe it ended up being 15-17 or something like that for the year. So they ended up going 11-8 or 12-8. I don't remember exactly what it was. 11-8, 12-8, something like that, in games that were within 3 points in the final minute. When you looked at it from that big win in Sacramento, 10th of January on. So things got a lot better. Dirk's presence on the floor also helped that out. Again, a stabilizing force, a place to go. I mean, when you're having all these mistakes late in the game and the turnovers, a lot of that is just really born out of players not only not being familiar with one another, but being thrust into roles and situations that they're not familiar being in. And so when everything is going crazy at the end of the game and you're in a situation they're not used to, when you've got Dirk out there, when you've got a go-to guy, if nothing else, it's a place to go so you don't screw up and turn the ball over and make a mistake. Give it to Dirk, and maybe he's not going to make the shot, but he is, and a lot of times, going to make the shot, a lot of times make the right play and make the pass to somebody who may or may not make the shot. So having Dirk out there was yet again another factor into the improvement in performing better late in games as the season transpired.
But Mark, how do you maintain team chemistry and confidence in that equilibrium when, as Rick Carlisle said, we're seeing more of a growing trend that these guys are on one-year contracts. It's trending more towards like how Major League Baseball is doing it. I mean, that puts a huge onus on the head coach and the coaching staff to get these guys up to par quickly.
It does, and I think that another thing that you need to have, though, is, again, when you have a superstar, that makes things a lot easier. And if you can get back to, and I think this is certainly, the indications are that this is the route they want to go, if you can get back to having a core of guys around that superstar, then that plays a big role in it, too. For a long time, there was that core of Jason Kidd, Jason Terry, Sean Marion. Tyson was only in here for a year, but he fit right into the mix. But you had 3 or 4 or 5 players who ended up being J.J. Barea, if I may throw another name in there. You had 4 or 5 guys that played together for 5+ seasons, and so at least you had a core of players, and a lot of whom would be on the floor together at the end of games, that were able to have chemistry established within themselves. And then you bring in a hard-nosed, tough, passionate, intelligent player like Tyson Chandler, and in his particular year here when they won the championship, yeah, it was only his 1 season here, but because of all of those attributes that I mentioned about him, then he's able to slide into the core of guys that had been here together for a long period of time and establishing chemistry and establishing roles and establishing, if I may use a corporate buzzword, establishing synergy at the end. Yeah, synergy. Gotta love synergy. You have that at the end of games.
Well, we certainly got spoiled, though, in that 2011 season, because how many times do we see them with their back against the wall in a precarious situation? And the cocktail of choice, of course, was Dirk, because he just muscle and take to the rack.
Well, those are great. Those are great days for sure.
Great memories.
Yeah, those are great memories and great days, absolutely. And we were spoiled by what we saw then and how well they executed in late game situations, especially in the playoff run in 2011, and not just executing well in late game situations, but the intestinal fortitude, the heart, the never say die attitude. I mean, there were many great comebacks, as we remember. One of them kind of was on my mind recently for those who saw the San Antonio Game 1 victory against Golden State. San Antonio jumped into a very select group of teams in the last 11 years who have rallied from down 15 or more in the last 5 minutes of the fourth quarter to win a game. The Mavs were one of the 3 teams to have done that when they had their big comeback in Game 4 against Oklahoma City. So yeah, we were spoiled by many historic, unique things that we saw over the course of that season and that playoff run.
You know, the month of June is going to be very interesting with the draft upon us, but what is the mindset for the Mavericks? I mean, there's obviously a number of intriguing names that are out there, Dwight Howard, Chris Paul. I mean, how do you see them self-jockeying for position as they look to move forward?
Oh, gosh, that's a great question. I'm not sure that I really have an answer to it. The draft will be the first thing to look at. They're going to have a lottery pick, presumably, unless there's some sort of trade that occurs, and I don't think that's going to happen. But you never know, especially with this front office. But the first thing to look to will be the draft. If things play out as the odds say they will, they'll pick 13th, 98% chance based on the results of the lottery that they'll stay in the position of picking 13th. I do think that they can get a good player there that they can start bringing into the mix this year. And then free agency will hit on July the 1st, and they'll have to do their evaluation beforehand of who they want to keep, what they would be willing to pay the players that they would look to keep, what their market value is going to be. That's going to be one step of the process. Of course, they'll have to do their due diligence with the biggest names like Chris Paul and Dwight Howard. I mean, you're certainly, you owe it to yourself and your fan base to do that. And they'll be making the appropriate phone calls, and appropriate meetings will take place on that front. But I think the lesson that was learned from last year when things didn't work out with Darren Williams and they had to scramble, and they put together a nice team that, as we discussed earlier, I think certainly could have been better had you had a healthy Dirk all year long and could have been a playoff team. But they did have to scramble, and I think that so while you're looking at CP3 and Dwight Howard, you're going to have a lot of other irons in the fire too, because we certainly understand that it's a long shot that either one of them, or heavens forbid, both of them would somehow agree to come on board with the Dallas Mavericks. It's very, very slim chances, but you're in the conversation, and you have to see how that goes. But you've got to make sure that you have irons in the fire, that if that doesn't work out, there are other really, I think, quality free agents that are out there that could be part of a core and be part of a good team here, because you still have Dirk to build around.
Well, fortunately, we have our triple threat. We are in good hands. We've got Mark and Donnie and Rick, and I'm sure that
triangle of trust.
There we go. I mean, it's complicated, but they're going to work it all out. Now, one of the guys I do want to hit on, I know we're running short on time, but is Brandon Wright. Certainly one of the most improved players, not only on this team.
You're a big fan of his.
I am a very big fan, Mr. Nashville now, but just the strides that he took, I mean, was really incredible. And I think he was one of the most improved players within the Western Conference. I don't know if that's a stretch.
I really, really loved what he brought to the table this year. And when the Mavericks get ready to sit down and do their meetings in the offseason and evaluate the construction of the roster going forward, you know, I mean, who knows what his market value is going to be, but I would hope that his market value will be in a place where the Mavericks can look at retaining him. He certainly is going to command a multi-year contract of some sort. I don't know what the dollar figure is going to be. I've heard people speculate, well, he might get Jan Mahimi money, which was 4 years and $16 million. And I think that'd be a great number to bring back a guy who can situationally start for you and be a great backup, and is a very, very efficient offensive player. He has his shortcomings defensively and rebounding wise, but it's not like he is terrible at those things either. You know, you just have to put him in the right situation for him to be able to contribute on that end of the floor. And I think we saw as the year played out that he was put in that position to contribute in that regard. So I love Wright on the offensive end. And if he can turn into a role over a full season where he plays the way he did in March and April, which was 23 or 24 minutes a game, between 11 and 12 points and between 5 and 6 rebounds and a block and a half a game, if Brandon Wright can be that player over the course of 82 games and he gets paid the kind of money that we're talking about, I think that would be a great signing for the Mavericks. I think that would be a great situation for him. He's put in the work. The Mavericks have put in the work to develop him. I really, really hope that that's a relationship that continues going forward, the Dallas Mavericks and Brandon Wright. So we shall see. Well,
Rick Carlisle certainly put in a lot of time with Darren Collison. I know there's a big question mark surrounding the one position, the point guard position. We saw Darren Collison, his effort, he's coachable, his offensive skill set, so difficult to contain, his dribble drive, his athleticism. Both his parents, in fact, were elite track athletes. But what about defensively? Did you see him progress? It seemed like he trusted the system more defensively. He wasn't hugging up on his guy, and he was providing that weak side help defense.
Yeah, you know, he certainly got better as the season went along. Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who's quick, who is going to be able to gamble and get in the passing lane and get steals and do things like that. You know, that's an area of the floor that he's going to have to work to get better on. I think you'd say the same thing about O.J. Mayo. And if those guys are somewhere else or here next year, wherever it is, those are two guys that are going to have to work to improve on the defensive end of the floor. But I think there's no doubt that Darren Collison and O.J. Mayo both, I know you didn't ask me about him, but I'll include him in this conversation. Both of those guys did their very best to put in the work, the extra time before practice, the extra time after practice. They put in a lot of work to get better. Rick spent a lot of time working with the two of them collectively and individually this year. And the hope was that you would bring in two guys who were in their mid-20s who could be part of a backcourt with the Mavericks for many years to come. Clearly, we saw that there was a drop-off in terms of leadership and stability when you didn't have Jason Kidd there to, at the minimum, run the ship in the last 5 minutes of the game.
And rebounding.
Yeah, absolutely. They certainly missed that as well. So not having him here and having those young guys here was one thing that didn't go exactly the way the Mavericks had hoped that it would this season. But as it relates to Collison, clearly I think the Mavs view him and the way they used him at the end of the year as a more effective player, as a spark plug off the bench. That's probably why his defense appeared to get a little bit better too, because maybe in a lot of those situations he was defending twos rather than twos as in second string players, not twos as in two guards, but second tier players on the other team's second unit. So to be in that position probably enhanced what his defense looked like as well. So whatever their market value is, we don't know yet what the Mavericks have in store and what the role they envision is, what the contract they envision is for those guys. All of that will play a factor into whether or not they're here going forward. That's something that certainly is up in the air, but under the right circumstances, those guys would be nice pieces to the puzzle to have in future years also.